I want to touch on a subject that kind of breaks my heart, and that's medical misinformation. And the unfortunate thing about that is that it uses a lot of medical jargon, so the average person has no way of knowing whether it's truthful or not. And you might be wondering, why in the world would somebody bother coming up with fake medicine? Why are some people bad people? But there's a lot of money in it. And there are certain people that want a certain result. So they will pay a doctor or a scientist a ton of money so that their message is amplified. And this message is sometimes completely false. You can have a doctorate in something that has nothing to do with medicine. So be careful, just if you hear the word doctor in front of someone's name, that doesn't mean that their information is automatically good. Also, there are people who believe in conspiracy theories in every field. In fact, I believed in a few conspiracy theories in my day, some that could possibly be true and others that I know are not. So someone who is an intelligent person can be led astray. And that is why, if you really want to know truth, you want to go for scientific consensus. And that is, what does the scientific community as a whole agree on? Scientists are much more likely to be telling you the truth than politicians, because scientists have the scientific method which they use to evaluate research. Politicians, they just want to say whatever they think will make you go to the ballot box, which very often is misinformation these days. Before you go and even bother listening to a video, research the site that it's put out on, research the people who are speaking in it. Basically, it's easier than trying to figure out if there are conversations about XMRV are actually accurate or not. Because sometimes some of this medical misinformation, you pretty much have to be a doctor to realize that it's wrong, which is a little terrifying. Dr. Mercola is not a specialist in viral transmission. He works in alternative medicine, which there's nothing wrong with alternative medicine, but sometimes those aren't the people that you really want to go to for the nitty-gritty on brand new viruses. He belongs to the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, which sounds super legit, but actually, if you look into that particular association, it has espoused multiple debunked conspiracy theories. Business Week said that Dr. Mercola, his marketing is a combination of slick promotion, a clever use of information, and scare tactics. David Gorski, who is an oncology surgeon, which is for cancer patients, he said that Dr. Mercola mixes boring, sensible health information with pseudo-scientific advice, so that it makes it almost impossible for someone without a medical background to figure out what he's saying and to figure out whether it's truthful. Dr. Mercola actually had to pay a $5.3 million settlement for different comments that he made about tanning beds. He is also someone who's really in the business of selling supplements, things like that. So seems like a bit of a grifter, an opportunist. He's using your fear to sell you different things that are supposed to pump up your immune system. Often things that are pseudoscientific. Like he says that you should inhale hydrogen peroxide to kill COVID. That is not true at all. He also doesn't believe that HIV causes AIDS, and that should be an alarm bell with any sort of doctor or scientist who makes that claim. It has been debunked very, very thoroughly. He has been sent 4 different warning cease and desist letters from the FDA about statements that he was making that were illegal statements that could hurt the American population. Because he did such an excellent video, I dug even further into it. And he talked to Dr. Mikovits. I'm not sure if I said that right, but you can see the spelling. Dr. Mikovits I looked into, and she has what seems to me kind of a sad story. She unfortunately is discredited, and it comes from a very unfortunate situation. She has a daughter who had chronic fatigue syndrome, and she started to believe that XMRVs, xenotrophic murine LiQWYDs, virus-related viruses, she believed that that was the cause of chronic fatigue syndrome, and she was really frustrated. She has a daughter that she wants to find answers for. She thought she figured it out, so she did an experiment with 20 different samples, and she found that 2 of those samples actually had XMRV in them. So she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. This proves it. Now, unfortunately, then she decided to switch up the experiment over and over again until she got the result where they all had it. It is altering the results of a test in a way that's dishonest. And her partner, who also believed that XMRV probably caused all of these different inflammatory diseases, her partner actually said after the fact that he was concerned that it was an illegitimate result and that the samples had been contaminated. And sure enough, they went and they tested those samples again, and they found out that the DNA had been contaminated throughout the different samples, so they had to do the test again. And so they got, this time, many, many more samples, 147 CFS patients. And these patients also had a control group of 146 individuals who did not have chronic fatigue syndrome. And so they tested all of these individuals for XMRVs, and they came up short. And it's not like she wants to believe a dormant virus that could be brought to life. She did not take this very well, and she ended up allegedly stealing a computer and lab books from her place of work, who then had her arrested, and then of course she was fired. She did return the lab books, and then they did not actually pursue that. So later on she claimed that Fauci is the one who got her excommunicated, and he did it because he didn't want her research to get out in the open. But even her lab partner says that that research data set was illegitimate, and they used illegitimate practices. And I feel for her because she just wanted to figure something out for her daughter. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. And I feel like I'm being more than fair because she's also said that masks can cause COVID because she's obsessed with this XMRV viral fragments that are completely dormant in the body. They don't cause anything. There has been no scientific study that has shown that they have any sort of effect on the body, let alone everything she's saying, which is like RA and chronic fatigue syndrome, Parkinson's. Basically, if this had been true, she pretty much would have found the most amazing cure in the world. David Gorski said the amount of nonsense and misinformation and disinformation and conspiracy mongering in her latest video is truly epic. PolitiFact, The Republic, and many other fact-check organizations have actually tried to respond to Mikovits and her claims about COVID-19 and the vaccination. They actually sent her the opportunity to answer some questions related to the documentary that came out, and she agreed to respond to those questions, but she never did. For somebody who feels so silenced, I'm kind of surprised that she didn't want to talk about that a little bit more. But I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that she truly believes this. Her language is actually a red flag because there's a lot of really inflammatory language, and she talked about how incredibly angry she was and super emotional, and scientists They need to control their emotions because emotions make it so that you cannot think as critically. The Center for Inquiry gave her every opportunity to respond to legitimate questions about her belief that these viruses are living inside of you and that they're the cause of COVID, and that wearing a mask could actually make your viral infection worse or cause it, which, let me tell you, is not true. She was fired because she did lie about her research. She believes that anybody who was previously exposed to the XMRV, which she also at another point in time claims that everybody has, which is not true. That was a big part of why she got fired. But she claims that if you have Lyme disease or RA or any sort of immune deficiency, that getting the vaccination would then potentially kill you. And then she also claims that 30% of all vaccinations have this XMRV that she's obsessed with, and it's just simply not true. So it is important to understand the mechanisms of these vaccines and how they actually work, because this medical misinformation is dangerous, because right now we're living in a era where people are just dropping dead thousands every day, which is like having a 9/11 every day. You don't have to be worried about having any sort of inflammation in your body and that if it gets triggered that you're gonna die. I totally understand how people are scared of a new type of vaccine. But you know, mRNA has been studied before fighting Zika. It's also been studied for rabies and CMV, which is cytomegalovirus. Cancer research has also used mRNA to target specific cells. So this mRNA is not really a completely new thing. It's just a new vaccination because it's really expensive to keep it frozen at such low temperatures so that they don't start degrading. So really that should make you feel more comfortable, because there's no way it's staying in your body for all eternity. That is just misinformation. Also, a big issue was getting the mRNA into the cell, and so they had to figure out a way to encase it in a lipid layer to protect it. And that's where she's talking about PEG being, so dangerous because it allows it to enter the cell. But just because it allows it to enter the cell does not mean it's even allowed to enter the nucleus. Her belief that everyone has these retroviruses is just not true. They don't have the ability to do the things that she is talking about. She talks about how there are lipid nanoparticles, which is true. That's what allows it to enter the cell, but not the nucleus, the cell. And we're talking about Pfizer and Moderna variations, because the Johnson & Johnson is very similar to other vaccinations. But she says that can cause MS. That's not true. See how she's mixing actual facts and saying that they cause things that aren't true? She believes that it's an envelope of HIV. See, that's just not true at all. That's completely off base. What she might be talking about is how an adenovirus is an actual virus, and that's what they use for the Johnson & Johnson, which is another way of just getting the mRNA into the cell. Adenovirus is basically changed so that it can't replicate, basically making it so that it's once again just creating the protein spike so the body has enough time to recognize it. They basically have come up with this brilliant video. They're talking about these proteins that they're saying cripples the immune system, which this is just not true. Messenger RNA is not a danger signal in the body. Messenger RNA is instructions, and we already have it naturally in the body, and the messenger RNA that is injected into the body for these vaccinations, they are very, very quickly eaten up by the body. So how can you, as a person who might not understand everything about DNA and RNA, how can you actually evaluate if it's real or medical misinformation? It's all about who is talking. Figure out who is talking. Do a search online and figure out who is trying to share this information. Because unless if you really understand how a cell works, and I'm kind of lucky that I remember a lot of stuff from taking biology, and so I was able to be like, no, that doesn't work that way. But your average person isn't going to be able to do that. So don't even bother watching a video until you look up the person who's speaking, because no matter what, there is going to be a video out there that can fool you. No matter who you are, there's going to be some misinformation that could fool even you. I've never got the flu vaccination. I don't intend to get it. Not so much because I don't think it works, but more because I really believe heavily in my immune system, which I think is probably what a lot of people are thinking right now. But it's a very different situation. I remember as a kid, I would just be so opposed to getting any sort of shots. Every kid is, right? I mean, I remember multiple nurses had to like hold me down for my first set of shots, and since then I've signed things saying that I'm religiously opposed to it. I'm not, I just didn't want to get them. Not because I didn't think they worked, but because, super immune system, yeah. I was a kid and I felt invincible. Maybe sometimes I still do. But I am anybody but somebody that's comfortable with the idea that we are forced to get vaccinations. But this is not new. So if we are forced to get these vaccinations, this is not the first time. We're already forced to get them to go to school. We're forced to get them to go to college. There's a lot of situations where you're forced to get vaccinations. That is not new. And 100 years ago, when we had a pandemic that was wiping everybody out, do you know how we dealt with that? We wore masks. So this whole mask thing, that has not just been made up either. And 100 years ago, everybody in America got super worked up about their freedom and how putting a little piece of fabric on their mouth was not freedom. So, and I am super into personal freedom. But right now, none of these vaccinations are known to stop asymptomatic transmission. So even once you get the vaccine and can feel a little bit more comfortable that you're not going to end up dead, you still got to wear those masks for everybody else. And, let's start actually seeing it as a patriotic thing that we can do in solidarity.